you're talking about these young men who are living in, I think, many cases, depraved states and a very, these are these downward spirals, and yet they still keep choosing to continue on this path rather than simply walk away and, think to themselves, I don't need to do this. I can walk away and I can go back home and I can go somewhere else. And yet they never seem to do it, do they?
Well, no, but I mean, that's because I think of all of these forces to demonize and confuse them about what it would mean to walk away, like what walk away towards what Charlie Kirk was offering, of a healthy sense of manhood and community. Tyler Robinson had been tricked into thinking that Charlie Kirk himself, represented evil and hatred. I mean, can you imagine, of course, the irony of saying, well, I have to get rid of all that hatred, and so therefore I'm going to, assassinate him. But even from a very young age, there's a very haunting photo of Tyler Robinson when he was maybe 13 and he's, absorbed at his computer gaming, and his mom, I think, had posted the picture herself with something like, haha, now he can, totally ignore us. And we know with those online games, they're rife with predators. I saw something recently on Sean Ryan's show about Roblox actually has child-facing materials there where kids can relive the simulation of shooting Charlie Kirk or of being in that audience. And so, young men are seeking a place where they can feel strong and useful and competent. And I think that these online worlds, whether it be through gaming or through pornography or some of these really warped places on Reddit or Discord, are hijacking that sense of manhood and pointing it towards something really
You
awful and perverse. So they don't
you just
realize they need to walk away because they think that they're developing into a hero.
they're developing into a hero, or perhaps even a type of hero known as a white knight. You just mentioned they want to feel strong and useful. Why is it that young men don't feel useful in today's society?
Exactly, because everything that would normally guide them to feel useful, like say to be providers, protectors, leaders within their church and their community. It's all been branded as toxic masculinity to them, especially if God forbid that they should be a straight white male. And so ironically, that desire to be useful and strong and helpful in society, they've been programmed to think the way to do that is actually to tear down society and to separate from, even the fact of their masculinity. I think that's why they may be so vulnerable to some of this, trans stuff. What better way to step away from what they've been seen as this, oh, I'm just a terrible, toxic, straight white male. I know I could be trans. Oh, even better, I'll be furry, or, date people within that space. I think it's a disavowal and, as you said, a dissociation from who they are because society in many ways has vilified them.
And this is a key element here because they're feeling vilified. So that's what creates the dissociation in the first place, that they then go and find new outlets, drugs, video games, online pornography, all of these other things, because and not to mention all of the economic effects as well that I think we talk about a lot here on the program in general when it comes to Gen Z, and how if you have this sense that the real world has nothing for you, that the real world is against you, that the real world is hostile to you, then perhaps you return back with the sense of being hostile to the world itself. And something else that you picked up or that you mentioned that I wanted to go back to, and you wrote an entire book about this, and it's the question of free speech. And so Charlie, of course, was a champion of free speech. He was participating in free speech when he was shot and killed. And in fact, the title of it was his Debate Me series. And you wrote a book, Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. So Charlie's perspective was, if you disagree with me, come to the front and let's have a conversation. Tyler Robinson, we're told in one of these conversations with his parents before they turned him in and identified him and all this happened, that I have to stop his hate. Now, as far as I know, Charlie wasn't ever violent to anyone. He never physically attacked anyone, but he did or did anything, in any capacity, breaking a law, something like that. But he did talk. Why is it that these people view speech itself as a form of an attack on them physically?
Well, I think in part because they've been, programmed to feel that way. I honestly think a lot of this traces back to Marxism and things that they're learning in schools, unfortunately. But it really is a very strong thread within the trans movement, specifically that if you should, say to a quote trans man, you're actually a woman, or use biologically accurate pronouns, they'll say you are threatening my existence. And I think, again, there's this issue of dissociation. And ironically, as a clinical psychologist, if I'm working with somebody, say that, comes into my office and says, hey, I'm seeing little green men, I would not immediately confront them and say, no, you're not, they're not there. My first questions would be, well, what do they say to you? How long have you seen them? I would be trying to explore and understand, what that delusion, what that psychotic delusion, represents to the person, because everybody knows, psychologists know, that if you just come in and you hit them over the head, by telling them that their delusion is false, they will shut down completely and, really act out and act up, very much like a trans person who says, you're threatening my existence, because they've hinged their existence on something that is untrue. So of course it creates a lot of instability. That was ironically the question that was posed to Charlie Kirk, is how many mass shooters are trans? And ironically, he was shot at that moment, presumably by Tyler Robinson, presumably, allegedly, in part maybe because of his relationship with Lance Twiggs about being trans.
So he's in this conversation, he's in this relationship, he's viewing his identity, he's viewing his as being wrapped up in this, which is beyond anything that the real world offers himself, and he just seems totally lost in this. It seems like he was totally lost in this identity, to the point where I suppose I should say he did understand that there would be consequences, because we do see these messages, we see these this sense with his parents. When his parents do confront him, he's trying to get the rifle and bring it back. He's trying to cover up what he did. So, is there a sense then, I suppose, that he's almost living like a double life, where he's one person with his parents, but he's another person with Twigs?
Yeah, I would say it certainly does seem that way, kind of a bifurcated identity, which again can be very isolating. That causes depression. It's actually one of the first things an abuser wants to do to a victim, is to isolate them and make them feel as if, their friends and family don't understand them. And I think that's exactly what happens when people go down this awful, trans furry porn rabbit hole online, where they just get deeper and deeper into this world that really does make no sense, that really is disconnected from reality. And then, of course, the dark forces there tend to vilify the person's actual family and say, oh, well, you should probably go no contact with them, or, oh, they're threatening your existence. Because, to your point about my book about free speech and the importance of speaking accurately, language is one of our most profound tools as humans. It's we actually, as psychologists, sometimes refer to words as objects that are representing prototypes. So it's really part of the glue that allows us to communicate together about reality. And so when people start, tinkering with that by saying like, oh, well, it's a trans man, or, oh, this is a furry, and then when other people push back on that language, because it is important to be grounded in reality and to be communicating accurately, they can start to unravel and become very hostile.